Okay, for our last video, what I'd like to do is sort of celebrate, first of all, our last day of school. It's a very strange last day of school. Never had one like this before, but it is the last day of school, so here we go. Um, I want to talk about the the history part of the video, which is a time period that is, it's not difficult to understand. It's just sometimes glossed over because it's the hinge. It's with the end of the Roman Empire and the beginning of a European history, even though the Roman Empire was part of European history. um, and so what I want to do is I want to look at the history of Rome, central and northern Rome, and down into Italy itself, from the fall of the Roman Empire in 476 AD to about 800, maybe a little bit after AD. Um, it's not a very long period of time. There were dynasties in China that lasted longer than this particular period of time. But if I can bring my students up to Charlemagne, then from there, the high school can take you into the Dark Ages proper, the bubonic plague or the Black Death, and look at the Age of Discovery and all kinds of cool things like that. But I want to get you guys to Charlemagne at the very least. So I guess the first thing that I want to do is I want to look at the end of the Roman Empire in the West. Um, it's very strange. Okay. It is an unusual series of events that lead to the decline and the fall of the Roman Empire in the West. Um, if we go all the way back, Rome was founded on the Seven Hills near the Tiber River. Their first government was a monarchy. Then in 509 BC, they kicked the last of the Tarquin kings off the throne and they become a republic, a thing of the people. And then somewhere between Julius Caesar becoming dictator for life and Octavian proclaiming himself Augustus Caesar, the majestic one, the republic is gone, and we have empire now. And then you have the Julio-Claudian emperors, and then you have the Vespasian and those cats, and then you have the good emperors of the Pax Romana. As we move through just that little refresher on Rome, the idea, especially early on, in the very beginning of the days of the early Republic, and I mean before the First Punic War, just trying to settle Italy. The idea was that the Roman Confederation system would be the way that the empire would grow. And that was real simple. They conquered a people and they came into the Republic as allies. If you behave, eat all your vegetables, go to bed on time, pay your taxes, give us troops when we want to, maybe one day you could become a citizen. Sometimes entire cities would become cities of Rome, sort of like citizenship for everybody who's eligible in the city. But the thing that drove the Roman Confederation was the idea of citizenship. And the thing that drove the idea of citizenship was the identity of a Roman. Not just that you had legal rights, but this goes all the way back to not really a type of envy, but the political reality that being a Roman was something to be aspired to. People wanted to be Romans. They wanted to be recognized as a Roman citizen. And for a long time, this Roman Confederation, with at the heart of it the desire to be a Roman, fed and controlled the growth of the Roman Republic. The Roman Empire was more about conquest, and the Roman Confederation system, citizenship was given out a lot more freely in the empire than it was in the Republic. And as a result of that, I guess it has to do with scarcity. I don't know. It just wasn't valued as much. In the years after the good emperors of the Pax Romana, after the death of Marcus Aurelius in 190 AD, you're going to see a series of events that are going to come together that will begin to sort of chip away at the idea that being a Roman citizen is something to be aspired to. The Emperor Theodosius will, upon his death, Theodosius I, will have the Roman Empire divided. When the Roman Empire is divided into two, you have the Eastern Empire and you have the Western Empire. Now, In spirit, they're supposed to be still one empire, but they have two co-rulers. It's not going to work that way. When Constantine moves the capital from the city of Rome, from the Seven Hills, to Constantinople, the new city that he will christen with his own name, or the old city that he will christen with his new name. There's a message that is being sent. And the reality is that the city of Rome is becoming old, corrupt. It had lost a lot of its grandeur under the senators of the Republic, or even under the early emperors, Augustus Caesar or the good emperors of the Pax Romana. And as a result, Constantine moves the capital. There's a power shift. The West will not only have to deal with that reality, but in the early 300s, late 200s, early 300s BC, you're going to see the fruit of some movements in Asia. Essentially, there's going to be wave after wave of nomadic peoples who will crash in to the eastern border of the Western Empire. Now, this is generally because of geography. Most of the time, these people didn't go west and then south. They just kept going west, and they hit the border of the Western Roman Empire. These Germanic peoples have names that maybe you've heard. The Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, the Vandals, the Franks. These people are going to come into contact with the Roman Empire for a particular reason. They are, in essence, moving this way because of who is behind them. And if the Roman Empire thinks that the guys who are hitting the borders of the empire early are a problem, wait till the one that most of them are running from gets there. The one that most of them is running from are the Hun under Attila. These are horseback warriors. They used very, very powerful bows and arrows, had a very interesting social structure, and they were very, very warlike. And so as a result of the Huns' movement west, these people groups were moving in front of them. And the Western Empire didn't deal with these people very well. At first it was warfare, then it was bribery, and then it was, we'll let some of you in, but that didn't treat them very well. And it's just going to be a reality. These people are going to be part of the Roman Empire because they're between Attila and the Roman Empire. They're going to come into the Roman Empire. And so you'll see a change in the makeup of who the Romans are. Now, please understand, these people didn't join the Roman Empire or become part of the Roman Empire through their own devices. They didn't wake up one day and say, I'd like to be Roman. That's not what happened. As a result, they're not aspiring to, as the early days of the Republic, this ideal of Roman citizenship. They want the safety of being in the Roman Empire. They're very, very different people culturally, and because of the way they're treated, and because sometimes it's like oil and water don't mix, there are going to be a lot of rebellions. There will be late in the Western Empire, parts of Spain and on the coast of Europe will be given to some of these Germanic peoples. Attila the Hun will come in, he will turn around, he will leave, and then he will die. Now, they do cut a swath through the Western Roman Empire, and it's a devastating invasion. But they don't want to be Roman. They have a different value system completely. And they are simply moving, they move in, and then they move out. And then Attila the Hun dies. And so his huge empire behind them, as it crumbles, or to the east, as it crumbles, that threat is gone, but now we have the presence of these Germanic people who've been sort of pressed into the Western Empire. You'll have rebellions, you'll have open fighting. You'll also have a large number of Germanic people who will be in the Roman army in the West. just paid soldiers. And their loyalties are really, again, going all the way back to Marius in the Republic. You're going to be loyal to the person who cuts the check. Well, they're not. They never were looking for this idea of Roman citizenship. They wanted that safety, and now with the Hun Empire having fallen apart, you've got this present reality of these people. You've got the Romans, the Western Romans, and then you've got these Germanic peoples. And as they begin to mix, sometimes it's not a very good mix. There are rebellions all over the Western Empire. The one that hurts second most, the one that hurts the most, is the fall of the city of Rome itself and Italy. But the up there high, as far as what hurts really bad, when the empire was split down the middle after the death of Theodosius I, the breadbasket of what used to be for the entire empire, Egypt, that will go with the Eastern Empire. And a lot of the grain to feed these bread and circuses policies that used to come from Alexandria will now come from Carthage, northern Africa. It had been conquered for a long time after the Third Punic War, Roman possession. There will actually be a Germanic group, the Vandals, who will conquer Carthage and cut it off for a while. And this shows how fragile the Western Empire is. And it also highlights another very interesting reality. Rome was pretty much always an agrarian economy. They never really moved past depending on subsistence farming. Somewhere, somebody's got to make the bread. When the Vandals cut off Carthage, it was pretty well exposed that the empire is way over dependent to keep the policies of bread and circuses going. We're way over dependent on Carthage. This shows that they're not self-sustaining. The rebellions and out fighting against these the Romans from these Germanic people who are inside the Western Empire will begin to carve up the empire well in the West, well before 476. And then in 476, what happens is Odoacer, one of these Germanic peoples, will basically take the throne in Rome from a 14-year-old Romulus Augustulus, and he will become the king of Italy. With that moment, historians are willing to just stick a fork in it. It's done. It's over. The West has crumbled. Not only has it fallen victim to corruption and infighting with its nobles and an army that has questionable loyalties, but now the soul, the heart and soul of Rome in the West has fallen. Now, this brings us to the next part. An oversimplification of the Dark Ages. If you think about the human body, what gives the human body structure is your skeleton, and it gives it a framework. Well, the Roman Senate, the emperor, and the laws with the military to enforce the laws, that was the structure, that was the framework of civilization. And when Rome fell, when Romulus Augustulus was kicked off the throne, and now you have, instead of the Roman Empire in the West, a barbarian king of Italy. Essentially what happened is somebody reached down Rome's throat and pulled out their skeleton. And then this gurgling blob on the floor with no structure, and it doesn't even really resemble what it used to resemble, is what you're going to learn about in the high school called the Dark Ages, a period where learning goes away, when it's a very harsh, dangerous world. Learning will be relegated now just to a very, very few small places, usually in Europe tied to the Christian church, where you'll have monks who will be copying manuscripts of the Bible and other works. Rome pulled out of Britain between 409 and 411 AD. The empire in the West officially falls in 476 AD, and with it, all of the structure is gone. And this gurgling blob mass on the ground is what's left. it won't take long for us to realize, as far as history goes, that the next part, the next page as we turn the page, is not Roman. Now, Rome will be looked back to. We're going to talk about an incident in 800 AD, on Christmas Day, 800, that kind of looks back to Rome. And the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, will still be very, very important. And so from this point on, when I refer to Rome, or when history teachers refer to Rome, we're primarily talking about the home of the Christian church, where the Pope is. So other than the structure of the church, which is going to be increasingly recognized, and I'll explain that in just a second, pretty much all structure is gone. And what we have now, we turn the page, on the new page, what we have are these Germanic people who are going to be fighting for control. Focus will shift sort of north from Rome to an area where the strongest Germanic group left are going to be, and they're called the Franks. The Frankish people will carry the story forward from here on. The first person of note, and it's not very long. If the Roman Empire ends in 476 AD, the story picks up in 481. In 481 AD, you have a Frankish king who is he forms a friendship, sort of a respect with the Pope, and his name is Clovis I. Now, Clovis is from a line of Frankish kings that are often referred to as the Merovingians. This is a very, very old line. They're not even really sure if the first of the Merovingians was an actual king, but needless to say, the Merovingians, one of the rock stars of the Merovingian line is going to be Clovis I. He'll become king in 481, and 15 years later, he will be baptized. He will become a Christian. He's the first Frankish king to do so. And so the relationship between Rome with the Pope and the Frankish kings will begin there. Now, other kings are also recognized by the Pope, but this is going to be important down the line, as I hope you'll see. So you have Clovis I, one of the rock stars of the Merovingian line. But that's almost just a blip on the radar, because as quickly as Clovis comes on the scene and becomes relatively well known for being the very first Frankish king to be baptized, after his death, the kings of the Franks begin to lose power. And power never goes away. Somebody's got the power somewhere. In the case of the Frankish people, it has just shifted. It's gone from the king to another position. This other position is often called the mayor of the palace. It's like a mayor of the city, where you get the mayor of the palace. The mayor of the palace will, for the next 200 years and some change, gradually get more and more and more power, until the position that you want, if you're in the Frankish kingdom, is not king. You want to be the mayor of the palace. Now, this brings us to a couple of dates that are relatively important. The next person I want to talk about is Charles Martel. Charles Martel becomes mayor of the palace in the early 700, like 714, early 700s AD. And for anybody who caught the name there, Charles Martel, that is what it means. Charles Martel means Charles the Hammer. He was not only a mayor of the palace, but he was also a very accomplished general. And in 714 AD, Charles Martel is recognized by the Pope publicly, sort of legitimizing him as the power, not the king, but the real power is not with the king anyway. Recognizes Charles Martel. In 732 AD, you have one of the most pivotal moments in Western civilization. You have the Battle of Tours. Now, let's go back to Islam. As we learned about in Islam, when Muhammad died, he did not name his successor. And so, after the first four caliphs, or successors, literally what it means, after those four who were pretty close with Muhammad, they knew Muhammad, The next group of caliphs were referred to as kind of an unusual name to our ears as the Umayyad Caliphate and or caliphs. And so the government run by the caliphs is a caliphate. So the Umayyad Caliphates will be creating a very, very large empire on the southern Mediterranean, and it will come up into Spain. Well, in the 730s AD, the Pope asked, and the what will become Aquitaine in what modern day France, the renegade province of Aquitaine, its leader will come to Charles Martel, and the Pope will say, yeah, you need to do this, and will say, look, the Islamic forces, Muslim armies are on our doorstep. They've come up through Spain, and the Umayyad Caliphate is threatening to push into Europe. We need your help. And so Charles Martel in 732 goes, and in French it's Poitiers, and we understand it as the Battle of Tours, and it is a turning point in history and in Western civilization. The Battle of Tours stops the Islamic movement into Europe. They will stop just south of the tip of Spain, and they will be pushed back down into Africa. And so Charles Martel becomes very famous because of this victory. Aquitaine is obviously going to be more loyal to Charles Martel. The Pope is going to think this guy is fantastic. And Charles, when he dies, when Charles Martel dies, his son Pippin will take the throne. Now, Pippin is going to be, he's not the first of the new line of kings, but he will start the line, and he will point back to his dad, Charles Martel, who wasn't a king. But Pippin will become mayor of the palace, his son Pippin, Charles Martel's son, and then he will become the king of the Franks. And this is where, being king of the Franks, you actually have some real power. The position of mayor of the palace is done away with, and so you've got a kind of celebrity kid. It's the son of Charles Martel, and he will be the beginning of what some historians call the Carolingian. So you had Clovis I with the Merovingian, and then you have Pippin I starting or claiming to start the Carolingian dynasty, pointing back to Charles. Pippin will, I guess really the most important thing that Pippin does in 754 is that he is going to answer a call for help from the Pope. There are a group of people in Italy called the Lombards, and for a long time they're very interested in getting the Pope out of Italy. Pippin will lead a Frankish army and will expel, beat, and kick out the Lombards, most of them, and will actually grant, after his victory, will actually grant the Pope some land, and that land will be called the Papal States. And so the Pope and this new Carolingian dynasty, they're getting along really well. Pippin will have a son, and his son will be named Charles. Eventually, he will be known as Charles the Great, or as he's known from the Latin, Charlemagne. Charlemagne is a warrior king, and it's a moment in history where it looks like we're reaching a high tide. It looks like, hey man, things could really go good from here. Now, Charlemagne, Charles the Great, will fight pretty much his entire time as king. He will attempt to unite all of Central Europe. Sometimes he's successful, sometimes he's not. There are a group of non-Christian Saxons in the northeast of Central Europe, and they're going to be a particular problem for Charlemagne. But he's going to try to unite all of Central Europe. He will defend the Pope. Charlemagne will create an empire. He will conquer lands, bring them into what he already controls, and he will create an empire that is going to be run by counts, will value some things that look a little bit Roman. And it sort of looks like we're heading into another period of stability, particularly when the events of Christmas Day 800 AD take place. Now, the Pope had some problems with some nobles in Italy who were trying to get rid of him and kick him out of Rome. And so Charlemagne comes down with an army, defeats those nobles relatively easily. He's a warrior king. He's got a lot of experience. And he is celebrating Mass on Christmas Day. And at the end of the service, the Pope comes in front of everyone and puts a crown on Charlemagne's head and proclaims him the Roman Emperor. Now, that's pretty cool. It bothered Charlemagne a little bit because he didn't like the idea of the Pope being the one who has the power to say that this is what's going on. But most kings during this time, unless they were pagan peoples like the Saxons in the northern central part of Europe, most kings, they listened to the Pope. They didn't want to fall out with the church. Now Charlemagne has been proclaimed Roman Emperor. Does get a little awkward there because there's already a Roman emperor. Remember, the Eastern Empire is still kicking like a pack of ninjas. They're doing great. And that emperor's like, what? What are you talking about? Charlemagne will take the crown. He will say, thank you very much. Have a great day. Call me if you need me. And he will continue fighting wars, unifying Central Europe, and bringing a period of stability into his reign. This time period is often referred to as the Carolingian Renaissance, where Charlemagne, Charles the Great, will try to revive or see a rebirth, and that's all the word Renaissance means, is rebirth. Try to see a rebirth of classical Greek ideas. Charlemagne tried very late in life to learn how to read and how to write. Never really pulled it off, but he knew that reading and writing was important. Charlemagne moved his capital around. The textbook is technically not correct. Aachen is not the capital of Charlemagne. Now, it is a city where Charlemagne would visit. He moved the capital wherever he went. That was the capital. But he did visit that city a lot, and later in life especially. But using his counts and especially his interest in learning, he had schools for children and for government officials. They began in the north. They moved their way south. They became an institution during his lifetime. I don't want to overstate. The schools during the life of Charlemagne became something that were going to be there. There's a new type of writing that is going to be formalized, Carolingian minuscule, that is going to be formalized to help with the reading and the writing and the communication inside Charlemagne's empire. There's an interest in the arts. There is not really a chivalry, but there's the idea that if you're going to serve the king, you have to serve the king honorably. If you're going to serve the emperor, you're going to serve the emperor honorably. And so it really looks like that history, the fall of the Roman Empire in the West was a real drag, and it got bad for a while. There were a lot of wars, and for the common people, this was not a good time. It didn't matter if you were in the Frankish empires or not. It was survival of the fittest and the strongest, and it was not a fun time. There was barely enough food to survive. Paying taxes basically amounted to being robbed oftentimes, depending on where you were. But Charlemagne, it really looks like Charlemagne's going to bring everything out. But he doesn't. The so-called Carolingian Renaissance was, I guess, really nothing more than a time of interest in learning and reading and writing and the arts based on the personality of one guy. And when he was gone, things took a nosedive again. The so-called empire of Charlemagne is going to shatter and fracture. There'll be another king, Otto, from one of the Germanic tribes, who will proclaim himself emperor. He's not going to be able to pull it together. There will be Frederick I, Frederick II. They're not going to be able to pull it together. And so for quite some time, until some type of normalcy is established, and it's going to be feudalism. It's going to be, you're going to have a king, you're going to have dukes, you're going to have lords, you're going to have peasants. You're going to have knights in there too. But until feudalism organizes around the church until feudalism organizes Europe and Britain. It's going to be a dark time. The court of Charlemagne, specifically in the city of Aachen, but in other places too, was a remarkable bright spot in an otherwise dangerous, dark, rough period in history. And it's interesting to think about someone just 3 or 4 generations after the Romans left Britain, looking at the ruins in Bath, and trying to understand how people could do this. Italy will remain under control of warring Germanic factions, and while Charlemagne proves that there can be bright spots, there can be good things that will happen, he's the exception. You have the high point with the Merovingians in Clovis, became the king of the Franks and was the first baptized of the Frankish leaders, and then you have that high point rock star of the Carolingians, Charles the Greater, Charlemagne. But European history for quite some time is going to be rough, dark as far as learning. It's survival of the fittest and the strongest, people barely growing enough to survive. Disease will ravage. But eventually, feudalism, with the influence of the church, will forge a new Europe and a new Britain. That will bring you into the age of discovery. This video is way too long. I hope you watched it all. Look forward to see you guys in the Zoom.